Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, back once again. Feels like it's been a while since, we did a drop episode for you guys. Thanksgiving was last week, so, had to spend time with the family, but the great company that's given me an opportunity to use their platform to make these podcasts for you. Said I didn't have to make any podcasts, on my usual date, where y'all would get episodes on Friday. So I was able to really take that time, enjoy time with family. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving week. Hope everybody will stay safe during Black Friday shopping. Hope nobody in their families got COVID, even though COVID is hitting hard. I know a lot of people are starting to gear up for another lockdown. A lot of toilet paper going. So, that's always the first thing that goes. Shows what everybody's number one essential thing is if there's ever a lockdown, toilet paper. So, all that good stuff. But, like I said, glad to be back. Glad to be making more shows for you guys. And, let's get into it. Today's show, we're going to get into some team breakdowns to start off. Talk about two teams in particular who've had interesting off seasons. Maybe different than what maybe some people thought coming into the off season. We have NBA news, some rumors still, things like that. We're going to talk about a lot of different things today. Some discussional talk, all that on the podcast. So, that's pretty much what the plan is for today's show. If you want to follow us on social media, I highly suggest following us at Twitter at GSMC_basketball. You can keep up with everything we do there. Interact with us, talk about basketball, takes, comments, concerns, anything. Interact with our tweets, all that. We definitely appreciate it, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and get right into And the first team I want to talk about, the first two teams that I was discussing, is I want to talk about the Clippers. The Clippers have had a very interesting offseason, I believe. They probably have had an offseason that some people didn't expect. Now, the Clippers were the favorite basically all of the last season. All of last season, Clippers were the number one team in Vegas's, odds makers, bettors' eyes. And then they lost it against Denver, gave up a 3-1 lead. Clearly, that was not ideal for a team of their stature to have something like that happen. So now people were thinking, okay, so Doc Rivers left. So they agreed Doc Rivers to walk. Now he's in Philadelphia. They added Ty Lue. They think he'll help from a coaching perspective. So now we're getting to the roster. They had, Montrezl Harrell was a free agent, Patrick Patterson, guys like that. So the moves they did make, additions for the team, is that they did add Luke Kennard, a 40% three-point shooter from Detroit, a guy who is basically a 3-and-D guy, not really considered one of the top-tier 3-and-D guys, but, if you shoot 40% from three, he is clearly a threat from the three-point line, for Larry Shamet, who is not as much of a shooter. He's more of a defender, so they might lose some defense there, but they're getting a guy who can stretch the floor. Because one thing I've always said about the Clippers is that if you look at the way their team is constructed, they have people who can make shots, but they really didn't have three-point shooters, if that makes sense. Because Patrick Beverley was never really a great three-point shooter. Lou Williams can get hot from three. Patrick Patterson is a 3-and-D kind of guy, but not a high-clip three-point shooter. They really never had a guy like a Kyle Korver or a Bertans or, a Bogdanovich or any of those guys, really. They never had that type of three-point shooter. They always just had guys who could score, who could play make, but they didn't have a lot of three-point shooters. So they added a guy who could space the floor. And then they added Serge Ibaka, a very good addition. A guy who can stretch the floor again. A guy, as you can tell, space the floor. Is a rim protector, can block shots. He got the nickname Serge Ibaka for a reason. And a guy who, is a veteran, can give him good leadership. And it's a guy who can add toughness in the front court. Now, their losses, they lost Montrezl Harrell, and what some people are saying, they didn't want him back. And they're saying that maybe he wanted to leave. And we all know about the issues that he had with Paul George throughout the season, with Kawhi Leonard, how he felt like, we were a team that would bring our lunch pail to practice and games every day, and they got here and they're able to take practices off, take games off, and he was not a fan of that. He probably wasn't. We don't know. Maybe he'll do a sit-down interview and say, hey, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. This was not it. I didn't like it. It rubbed me the wrong way. I'm out here busting my butt, and they're over here getting all these privileges. And so, that happened. And then there was one thing that Kawhi asked Steve Ballmer for this offseason was a point guard, because they need a playmaking point guard, because Patrick Beverley is not a playmaking point guard. He's a good defender who can occasionally hit the three ball. So, which is good. You need a guy with the energy that he brings, the tenacity that he brings. You need a guy like that. He's kind of the Draymond Green of the Clippers, you could even say. But, that he's not a playmaking guard. And that's one thing they needed. They thought they were going to get Rondo, but Atlanta came out with money, and Rondo went for the money. So now they're looking. There's been rumors that they may look into a guy like Terry Rozier, even though that would be a hard trade to pull off. Apparently, Michael Jordan loves Terry Rozier, even though he drafted LaMelo and Devontae Graham broke out last year. So maybe it may be a little difficult. They might have to get a third team involved to potentially make a trade like that happen. But those are just potential, a potential guy they can go after. Now, there's now even more rumors on the Clippers' end where they're saying that they're even going to shop Lou Williams. Now, the three main players that they said last year who primarily did not necessarily get along the best with, what was happening with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George was Montrezl Harrell, who's currently gone, Lou Williams, and Patrick Beverley. And so now people are thinking the Clippers are trying to get rid of the guys who necessarily were not on board with what happened last year. And it's interesting the message it sends to me, because I'm trying to figure out, are you trying to send a message? We're trying to allow these players to have what they want. And so if y'all have an issue with it, you need to go. Is it that you're worried that the locker room chemistry will never be great because of that? Because you already have players who are rubbed the wrong way, and you're trying to keep the players that are already there in Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. So if they're potentially not feeling good vibes from those players, that could potentially make them leave. Those are some questions that I have for the Clippers. But, that would be a big move, because you would think in that situation, if you trade Lou Williams and then you lost Montrezl Harrell and you still haven't found you a point guard, it's kind of like, are the Clippers getting better or are they getting worse? It feels like, do y'all feel like y'all are a better team now? Because it doesn't seem that way. That's why, it would depend on what they could give up. What could they get back for Lou Williams? Now, they just signed Nick Batum, a guy who was paid big money in Charlotte. Never lived up to expectations. Still a decent player. One thing about players sometimes like that who get overpaid, it's not they're bad. They're just not that good. So they could still play. So another guy who's more of a 3-and-D guy at this point in his career. And there's one common denominator to all the additions they have made is their spacing. They clearly want to space the floor. They clearly want to give more opportunities for maybe Kawhi or Paul George to get into the paint and then have guys they can kick it out to. So that may be a move they're trying to do. And even Lou Williams, even though he's a great scorer, he's not a great shooter. He can get hot from range, but he's not a great shooter. So maybe if they did try to trade a Lou Williams, they may try to get another 3-and-D guy back. Plus, Lou Williams isn't the best on the defensive end. So maybe they try to get a better defender back as well. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. And there's even rumors they were open to trading Patrick Beverley, even though they feel like that would be a very hard trade to make. So, it'll be interesting if the three guys who we heard all of this past season in reports having an issue with what was happening with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in the treatment, the preferential treatment they were receiving. And then now the Clippers are saying, we're going to move all of you guys. It's just interesting to send that message to the team, because it makes it come off like, basically, if you try to call out our best players, if you try to say you disagree with how we're handling our best players, we won't hesitate to potentially move you. So to me, that's something that, is an interesting message to send, because we understand the Clippers are in a situation right now where they're trying everything in their power to keep Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Now, some people wonder if potentially they may even consider moving to Paul George. Now, that would be something to me I would look into the season. If Paul George, who struggled tremendously in the bubble, if he came out this next season when it starts up and he struggles again, if I'm the Clippers, I would look to maybe move him because something tells me there is a possibility, if right now in my gut, that Kawhi Leonard is more likely to move on if out of the two, because I think Paul George, is being recognized around the league as he's a guy we can add to our trio or, big time team. He's not someone I think teams look at and say, I want him to be the core, because of some of the performances you've seen the last few years on the teams that he's been on. And I feel like, the Clippers are maybe in a situation where if they wanted to salvage their roster or feel like they want to stay competitive, because the big issue they're facing is that after this season, they move into their new arena that they have built. And when you have a new arena, you always want stars to help open up that arena. Because more than likely, when that arena becomes open, I would hope COVID has pretty much been done with. Vaccine is out there, and now we're having full capacities at crowds of games. So if that's the case, and you're opening up a new stadium, you need people that fans are like, oh, opening day, I get to see Kawhi Leonard, Paul George in the new arena against, I don't know, I'm sure the NBA will give them a big time team, maybe the Lakers, and boom, now the great opening night for the stadium or the arena. Where if you lose Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, it's like, we're not that good, and we're playing against a team that's better than us, and do I really want to spend that kind of money? Because with new arenas, they upcharge those prices, especially out there in California, and you're paying a lot of money to go see a Clipper team lose, even though they have their own arena. It's like that's the big thing, because you're always trying to sell the arena. You're trying to make people say, come to the game because we have stars. And if I'm the Clippers, if they lost Kawhi Leonard, to me, I would probably have to restart, because I can't sit here and say, let me salvage this, keep Paul George, hope we can build a competitive team. Unless you could get another star to replace Kawhi Leonard, you probably need to blow it up. That's why I remember when Ty Lue was hired, when he got his contract extension, I said to you guys here on the podcast, don't be surprised if Kawhi and Paul George leave. That's why they gave him the deal they gave him. Because they may like Ty Lue to the point where they feel like if we did have a loss like that, he could help drive the ship. We could help build another team, another competitive team with Ty Lue at the helm. Because I would not, to me, I don't see you giving Ty Lue a 3-4 year extension, knowing you may only have your top guys for a year. If anything, you would keep him on what he has now, or maybe give him a 2-year deal with an opt-out or something like that, where it's like, okay, if they leave, maybe I don't want to have this job anymore. To give him that type of job security, not even knowing if his best players are going to be there after a year, to me, it makes me feel like the Clippers are preparing for Ty Lue to be there even after, if they leave. But obviously, best case scenario, hey, we hope they stay. We hope that they continue to be a part of what we're trying to do here in LA. And hopefully we can then make the drive forward for the championship that we want to bring to our team. Because, they may look at, if we win a championship this year, now we're going to unveil a banner already in our new arena. So even though they haven't won one in the arena yet, they have won one for the arena. So that's something I'm sure Clippers fans would love to see as well. So we're going to have to really see what happens here with the Clippers moving forward. They have had a very interesting offseason. To me, everything that has happened has been extremely interesting. They're not done clearly by far. I think they're still going to try to make a move. They're going to make a lot of underlining signings, guys who may not be off the radar guys. But I would not be surprised if they get another point guard in there. I definitely think they're going to try to do one name to look out for, not because he's going to be a star player for them, but Jeremy Lin. A lot of teams are interested in Jeremy Lin. Maybe he's a guy the Clippers go after as a last resort potentially, because Jeremy Lin can still play. And he's a little bit more of a player and a scorer than Patrick Beverley, and still gives him something a little different. So that's just a name to throw out there to you guys. But coming up next, we're going to get into the other team that's had a very interesting offseason to me, based off the fact that they had higher expectations coming into it. And now afterward, we have to figure out where their expectations now with this current constructed team. Stay tuned.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we were talking about the Los Angeles Clippers. We're talking about the offseason they've had so far, how they're intriguing me with what they're trying to do. With a lot of the rumors that we've heard, it feels like the Clippers are doing a lot of subtracting. And so it's like, are they getting better? Do they feel like they're going to be better? Because sometimes subtraction could mean better. But it kind of is weird, especially with them trying to trade Lou Williams. You know, they added, like I said, guys like Luke Kennard and Serge Ibaka, trying to maybe trade for Trey Rozier. It's all been a very interesting offseason, the rumors that you're hearing out of the Clippers camp. We obviously know that they're not done yet, so we're going to have to see what they continue to do moving forward, but it'll be interesting to keep an eye on the Clippers situation and what they decide to do when it gets down to it. But before we get into the next topic, I would like to remind you guys, whatever platform that you're listening to us on here, please don't forget to leave a review or subscribe. We definitely appreciate it. You know, definitely love to hear your feedback on how we're doing, so, you know, how I can be better as a host and etc. So don't forget to do that, whatever platform you're listening to us on, as we are available on any platform that podcasts are available at GSMC. But, so, the next team that has caught my attention, the Golden State Warriors. Now, coming into this season, Golden State viewed this year after last year as the boom year. Okay, now we're back, championship contention, boom. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they viewed this as like, okay, we let y'all have y'all year. Now we're back and we're going to be the best team in the NBA, or one of the best teams in the NBA. Well, all that suddenly became derailed when Klay Thompson tore his Achilles. And now he's out for another year, and we don't know what's going to be of Klay Thompson when he returns. So now if you're Golden State, you're put in a position where you're just like, okay, so what can we be? We still have Steph. We still have Draymond, two of our core pieces. But we know Draymond Green is one of those guys, he needs a certain group around him to be impactful. If you have a very average team around him, he is not a very impactful player. He is what maybe some people consider a average player. But with Klay and Steph, it worked so well. That's why he was impactful. And so he needs a certain team around him to be impactful. And so you still got Steph. So what else do the Warriors have? Now, they brought in Kelly Oubre, who came off a career-high year, averaged 18 points a game, career high from threes. Clearly, you know, even with that known, he is not a three-point shooter, so to say, in terms of like a Klay or a Steph. So he's more of a general scorer wherever he can get his shot, even if it's at the three or in the paint or to the rim. A guy who's improving defensively. A young guy, though. Very young and talented. And, you know, a good pickup, but not Klay. And then you have Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins, by most people's account, has been very disappointing. Came second pick in the draft. People thought he would be one of the best star players in the game. Like people really came into here thinking Andrew Wiggins was going to be one of the better players in the NBA by this point. And he has been a disappointment. Like he's not a player who isn't good, but a lot of people have questioned his motivation. A lot of people have questioned his drive. A lot of people have questioned his desire to be better. We know about the situation with Jimmy Butler, you know, and so when he was traded to Golden State, some people said, hey, maybe This will help him because he's getting a winning environment, a winning system with winning players, a very good culture, and maybe it'll help him maybe be more motivated to improve his game so he can be better. Because Andrew Wiggins doesn't fit the mold they've been, which is a three-point shooting team. He is a very not good three-point shooter. He's more of an in-the-paint kind of guy, gets to the rim, athletic player. And then you get to their second overall draft pick this year in the NBA draft, James Wiseman. A guy who has some guardish skills. He's been practicing with guards. I don't know if you guys watched some of his workouts and some of the things he's been saying and leading up to the draft, but he's been trying to improve his ball handling, his shot. A guy who probably, I think, will get to a point where he'll be able to have a reliable three-point shot in the game, or at least a respectable one. Isn't a shooter either. He's right now, back to the basket, probably maybe mid-range kind of guy. A guy who uses his athleticism like most players coming into the draft. Athleticism is his thing. So you have 3 players in your lineup who aren't necessarily what you traditionally have. Now, what you have is, with Steve Kerr and his biggest task yet. Last year was, okay, we don't have much talent. Steph was out early in a lot of the year. We're just trying to see who we may want to keep for next year and get the most out of the players we currently have. That's what they were trying to do. But there was no expectations. This year, the team is better. Like, it's still better than last year's team. But are we a playoff team? Are we a second-tier Western Conference team? What are we? Are we not a playoff team? You know, and what are we without Clay? And so, if you're Golden State, you're kind of like, okay, we may have to change the way we play to adjust to this team. Because to me, when I look at Golden State, I see, okay, Curry's still going to be your best player. Curry's probably going to have to be almost MVP-like. Close to 30 a game, you know, doing his thing. Because right now, we know for sure Steph can probably still score. Kelly Oubre, if he could give him around the exact same he was able to give Phoenix last year, that would be big. Big questions to me are Andrew Wiggins and James Wiseman. Because if you honestly look at the starting 5, it's not a bad starting 5. It's not a starting 5 that you would sit here and think only can win 20 games. You have talent. James Wiseman could be a star. And then you have 3 stars on Golden State again. Kelly Oubre, if he continues to be better than what, even if he improves his game from last year, you look at this team and think, okay, they would still be a competitive team. They still have Steve Kerr. You know, they still have talent. But you don't know what they're going to actually be at the end of the day. And I think that's where, you know, these questions just continue to linger with these guys. It's just because you don't know what they're going to be. And for the most part, you would think Golden State wouldn't make probably too many moves this offseason. From this point on, they're probably going to go into the offseason with who they have. I mean, into the regular season with who they have, work with what they got, and try to do that. Now, some people have asked, would the Golden State Warriors potentially trade for Russell Westbrook? I'm going to go ahead and say right now to anybody because I understand Russell's out there and you're wondering. I definitely don't think that's going to happen. He just does not fit what Golden State does. So definitely not something that I feel like is going to happen. So we can kill that right now. Now, I do want to get into their draft. They drafted a guy named Rico Mannion. A guy who was a top high school recruit coming out. Went to Arizona. Had kind of a down year. You know, like I said, he was a top guy. He was projected to be a lottery pick when he came out of high school. Because, you know, they usually have those projections for guys coming out of high school. Arizona, not a good year. He is a guy I look out for. Because he has some talent. He can ball. Needs to improve his shot. That was his big thing. He was very inconsistent from 3 and from you know, just regular jump shooting. a guy who could help this team from a shooting perspective. Not sitting up here saying he about to be Splash Bros 2.0 or anything like that. So let me go ahead and kill that right now. But I would definitely look out for Rico Mannion. I think he'll definitely get some minutes this year with the roster they have. Because really outside of the starting five, they still have a very, fluid bench situation. A lot of guys coming in and out. Some of the guys from last year who started are now on the bench this year. Bringing Rico Mannion in. I'm very intrigued to see how he does with Golden State this year. A guy that I think, like I said, college was a down year for him, but has talent, or else he wouldn't have been a top guy coming out. It's just more about his development, because the Warriors, to me, even though they have never really, people forget this, the Warriors have a very good developing culture. They're good at developing players. They're good at saying, okay, we're going to take you, and we're going to take you, and we're going to develop you, and you're going to become better in our system. Because remember, Klay developed in the system. Steph developed in the system. Draymond developed in the system. Now they're the core pieces. So they're very good at development of players. Players get better playing for Golden State. So that's why I would be that Rico Mannion is someone I would look out for throughout the season, because he could really come in and provide them some very key minutes off the bench. A guy who I think could maybe score some points because of the motion offense Golden State kind of runs, could present some good opportunities for him. But, for me overall, I look at Golden State and think they could still, people keep trying to ask championship. Can they compete for a title? I think we need to just say, hey, can they get to the playoffs? Which I think, in my personal opinion, they still could. I think Golden State could still compete for a playoff spot. I don't feel like they're this horrible team that can't play with anybody. They can compete for a playoff spot. But depending on the development of Andrew Wiggins, Kelly Oubre, James Wiseman are the main three. How they play this year, to me, will dictate what Golden State is. It's not about Steph. Steph's going to get his. If Steph stays healthy, Steph going to get his. We know what Draymond is. We know what he is. If Andrew Wiggins came out here averaging 20 a game, and then Kelly Oubre gave you 8 in the game, and Wiseman was giving you a bunch of putbacks and blocks, you got Steph doing Steph stuff, would you not think, hey, that's a pretty good team? So I would not be surprised if we got later into the year and we're, at the 50-game mark, and we're seeing Golden State very firmly set in the playoffs right now at that time. Because they have talent. It's not like they're talentless. Last year, outside of Steph, didn't really have much. You still got 2 of your core pieces. You have 3 young, talented players that you are all hoping gets better in your system, in your factory of Golden State. All you can do is, now here are 2 things that make Golden State seasons derail. If Steph gets hurt, because then at that point, I don't think they would be a playoff team. Or if Kelly Oubre and Wiggins and Wiseman struggle, and they struggle to produce and show. If Wiggins does not play well, Oubre takes a step back, and Wiseman struggles trying to adjust to NBA life, then that will be another thing that derails them. But outside of that, if they're pretty much on track, teams are playing well, Steph Curry plays healthy, I expect Golden State to be in the playoffs this year. And I don't think that people should be worried that they're falling off and, they're not going to be good. And then maybe we'll see where everything is. You know how this type of stuff goes. We'll see where they are when that comes. We don't know. They might make some additions. You never know. Trade deadline comes up. Golden State's in a good position. They may say, hey, let's try to make another trade. See if maybe we can get even better. That's because Golden State's always been a team who's always tried to be one step ahead. So they could always be still relevant, even when teams catch up, and still be better. So that's one thing they've always prided their hat on, and that's why Golden State's been so successful for so long. But coming up next, we're going to get some more NBA news, so if you want to stay tuned for that, stay tuned right here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, I discussed the Golden State Warriors, another team that interests me this coming season because of the fact that now that Klay is gone, what will the team be? Can they still be competitive? Can they still be a playoff team? You know, I'm not going to sit here and say championship contender. But I feel like if you're still a very competitive team, I feel like this is a year where you say, okay, where are we with the talent we have? Then let's say we get Klay back next year. Where would we think that puts us then? Then we have to see clearly what Klay is at that time. But, you know, a lot of that. We discussed all that last segment. Very second, we discussed the Clippers, talked about their situation. So now we're going to get to some more individual team news here. And again, a reminder to don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_basketball. That is GSMC_basketball on Twitter. If you want to follow us, keep up to date on everything we talk about concerning the basketball landscape, interact with us, leave comments, all of that. Definitely suggest and highly recommend it as well. So some rumors. So first, the Lakers are meeting with Anthony Davis as early as next Tuesday. So, which in terms of next Tuesday really is just this. We know Anthony Davis right now is currently, you know, because this podcast is going live Tuesday. So he could meet with them basically today. And we know he's trying to decide, does he want to sign a 1-and-1? Does he want to do a long term? What does he want to do? What kind of contract does he want to sign? We talked about last episode how there are rumors that he might sign a 1-and-1 to potentially free up money to get Giannis next summer. And then maybe him and LeBron might take less money to help make that happen, to fit under all three of them under the cap. That may be one reason Anthony Davis might sign a 1-and-1. There's even been talks about him signing a 2-and-1. Potentially, you know, saying, okay, I'm going to play a year with LeBron, play a year potentially without LeBron, and then see where I'm at. Or he'll sign a long-term deal where he'll give the Lakers long-term commitment where he's basically saying, LA, I will be your pillar. I will be the player that you can build around, and let's see what happens. And so for me, looking at this, I think this is going to be interesting. I'm sure the Lakers preferably would prefer Anthony Davis sign the long-term deal knowing he'll be around. Because you don't like that nerves of what if LeBron did say, let me go somewhere else? Would Anthony Davis sit here and say, would I be back in my same situation I was in with New Orleans? Because if he is, that's what he was trying to get away from, and he may sit here and say, the only difference is that I'm in the exact same situation in New Orleans, but I'm in bigger lights. People are going to notice it. Now, I've said before, by all indications, there has been no indication that LeBron is planning on leaving LA. LeBron has just been signing the deals he signs to give himself leverage. It's all about leverage. Because that's another rumor that has been, or another discussion, a topic that's been discussed around execs about the player option, which I'll get a little bit more into detail, but I'll stick on Anthony Davis before getting into that. And so if LeBron stays, it feels like Anthony Davis is going to always want to remain in a situation where he feels like he could win. And if LeBron stays, he'll probably feel like in a situation he can win. So he'll have absolutely no reason to really consider saying, hey, let me go to a different team and try to win there, unless he just personally maybe has a personal challenge for himself, has a personal thing he wants to accomplish. And so that would be the only thing you could maybe think of that he may actually end up doing. Now, when we're getting into the execs of the player option, there has been some discussions about the option. Is it good? Is it bad? And they say the leverage, honestly, goes to agents and players, clearly, because they now have the ability to say, I can still get top-tier money, but not have the long-term commitment, and basically be like, if the team does not do right by them, the team rubs them the wrong way, the team looks like they're going in a bad direction, players still have the flexibility to get out of contracts, go sign with the other team. Also puts teams in very familiar situations in terms of trades, because what if he has a year left and all indications say he's not coming back, and let's say you may want to move right now even before the season ends. I mean, that, puts leverage in their hands, because it's just like, hey, usually most teams with star players don't want to lose star players for nothing. So with that being said, and with all that being known, it's pretty obvious to me that the player option that has been established really by LeBron has really helped out and has really established themselves in a very great place. Because it really puts them in a great position to take advantage of their flexibility. And I think that's what, going back to Anthony Davis, is going to be the interesting question with him. What is his plan? What is his idea? What is his thing? People, think, well, Anthony Davis, if he repeated, would he feel like, okay, I've won 2 championships, I'm still a top 5 player in the game, and for me to validate myself as I can win a championship as the best player, should I move away from LeBron? Or if LeBron leaves, should I stay in LA and potentially try to win a championship with whoever? Because, one narrative that LeBron did try to push this past season, because I think he sees it too, is that if we win, it's because of AD. If we win, it's because of what he did for us. We are unstoppable when AD plays through how he knows how to play. That's the thing. It's not, me, it's him. Because he's trying to make sure that Anthony Davis gets enough of the credit and enough of the spotlight to basically say, if we're successful, it's not just because, LeBron James. We're successful because of Anthony Davis. And to instill a confidence in AD, because I think that's big too. He wants to instill a confidence in Anthony Davis, because he knows that if he feels like he can be the best player in the games and win, he's going to feel like, well, if I can do this, then if LeBron left and I'm still the best player on the floor and I still play like the best player on the floor, as long as I get enough support, it will solidify himself. Because Anthony Davis is getting into that realm where, you get to that star player realm where outside of numbers, okay, yeah, you're going to be one of the greatest stat people to ever play the game. You're dominant, yes. But it's like you need the championships to validate. And now we might even get to a point, potentially, even though it doesn't feel like it's going to be the case. But you still have certain players that are stars that are like, okay, I've won some championships. Maybe I need to try to win on a different team to prove to myself I didn't potentially need this situation to be this great player. And I think that's the biggest thing we have to look at. I think that's one reason why KD, he never fit in with Golden State completely. But I think he went to Golden State thinking, if I go here, win championships, people will validate me. Not realizing people are questioning you even more, not because of your talent. Nobody questioned Kevin Durant's talent and how great he is. They questioned the fact that he went to a team that didn't need him, won championships. And so he was like, well, that still doesn't show me that you are validated as this, from a legacy perspective, your legacy up there with a LeBron or a MJ or anything of that sort. Because you had to go to a team that was already basically a minute away from winning another championship to win a championship. Instead of going to a team where you are solidified as the best player. When you construct a team like Brooklyn constructed a team, it's a bunch of players thrown on one team. It's KD's team. If they win, KD gets the credit. Like I said, Clay, Steph, all of them were there. So when he came there, yes, even if he was the best player in the finals, it was still going to be given a lot of credit, especially from the home fans, to Steph and Clay, not KD. That's why some people say there's a lot of pressure on KD this year to win a championship in Brooklyn. Because if he does it, it may feel like he'll get that validation that he's been seeking. Because he now won one with his team and prove that he is of that great stature. And I think that's where Anthony Davis is going to be in if he wins another championship with the Lakers. Then you know what happens with LeBron. Of course, he's still young enough where it's like he doesn't have to necessarily go and leave. He may sign another 2-1 if LeBron leaves, or a 1-1. And just keep his options open and say, depending on where the Lakers are going, I might need to go here to continue my legacy, to continue to build my legacy, and potentially win because of those potential factors. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does. And we're going to have to see how everything kind of ends up going for them. You know, they're a good team. A lot of good things can happen. And we'll have to see how it ends up. Now I want to get to this quick one before we get into the next segment. Or go on break, actually, before getting into the next segment. There are a couple reports coming out of Milwaukee that the trade for Jrue Holiday is, from people close to Giannis's camp, from what people are saying, is a good sign. They're saying that he must have liked the move, and now it's helping the Bucks, which could potentially mean, hey, them adding Jrue Holiday to him feels like, okay, I like the move. Because remember, we have heard throughout this offseason, Milwaukee has remained optimistic and confident that they will be able to get Giannis to commit to an extension before the deadline, which I believe is December 21st. And if they do, they'll clearly be like, okay, now we're set. Basically, what Milwaukee is trying to get from Giannis at this point is security and comfortability. Basically like, hey, we did what you wanted, so please stay. Because Giannis feels like a guy, to me, and I've said this multiple times on the podcast, he does not want to leave Milwaukee. He does not. He just understands if they're not going to put me in the best position to win, I have to at least explore my options to potentially win somewhere else. And so, if that is the case, then clearly, if they're bringing in players that he feels like are going to be beneficial to him winning a championship into the future, you would think, with all signals and signs, Giannis will sit here and say, you know what, y'all did what y'all wanted. I feel like we're in a better place as a team, as a roster, and I'm willing to make that commitment to you guys and say, hey, I'll commit. I'll sign the big deal. I'll commit, and let's see if we can win this championship. You know, so because the Bucks have already said they're willing to go into the season with no extension, and are willing to play the year out, potentially losing him. But they also feel like they may have a silent confidence of, hey, we may not even have to get to that point. He may end up signing the contract extension before the season even starts. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we have more news. We actually have some Boston Celtics news on Marcus Smart, plus other NBA stories and discussions right here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we discussed multiple things. Last segment, we discussed the Bucks feeling pretty good about keeping Giannis based off the signals they've got from the camp, especially about the Jrue Holiday trade. Getting Jrue Holiday seems like a move that Giannis definitely approves of and looks like will potentially help keep him in Milwaukee. We'll obviously have to see if he actually ends up putting pen to paper, but it definitely bodes well, so they're becoming more cautiously optimistic. Then we also talked about AD. He's meeting with the Lakers as soon as Tuesday. And they talked about, I talked about how, he has a very interesting situation. He's looking at a different number of contract situations, and he's trying to figure out, okay, what's best for me, and what is his plan for his own career moving forward in terms of, his legacy. Because is he okay potentially being left with the Lakers if LeBron leaves? Would he be able to do that and be like, okay, I'm okay, I feel in a better spot to be the guy, and I'm ready for the challenge? So we talked about that as well. So first I want to get into more on what I was talking about last time with KD, because you heard it on the big platforms. You heard it from Stephen A. Smith. He's been one of the bigger vocal people. You've heard it from a lot of people. That a lot of people feel like, a lot of people are projecting the Nets to be the best team in the Eastern Conference this year. A lot of people are projecting them to come out of the East and win. And so a lot of people are wondering if that's the best move. And what I mean by that is, are the Nets truly the best team? Because if there's one difference between them and a Miami and a Milwaukee, even though they'll have some changes, and a Philadelphia, especially if they don't move on from Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, they haven't played together with KD. We don't know what this team's going to look like with KD as the main guy and then Kyrie being the secondary guy. Let's just say hypothetically they don't make the trade for Harden. They don't make that trade. Because obviously that would just be an even bigger question mark in that situation. But, the Nets, the Brooklyn Nets, if you think about their franchise history when they were the New Jersey Nets, they made those finals appearances with Vince Carter and Jason Kidd. They were a very good team, probably one of the, I wouldn't say the popular team, but they were definitely a competitive NBA team in the mid to early 2000s. And, that was one of the few times you really think about the Nets and said, wow, they had success. And really ever since then, they tried it again when they tried to trade for Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and all them, Joe Johnson and Darren Williams, and we saw how that didn't work out. They had just moved to Brooklyn. And then ever since then, they really never had that much success. They had some success with Kenny Atkinson, with D'Angelo, but they've always been they've kind of been quote unquote irrelevant within the New York area in terms of basketball. We know New York is a Knick town. It will probably remain a Knick town. It's kind of what the Clippers are in right now with LA. It's going to probably always be a Laker town. But they've never, but the Nets have never been able to establish themselves on their own as their own franchise that was good, even if they were better than the Knicks for a decade, or if you look at the last 20 years, you have to say the Nets have been better than the Knicks. But it hasn't necessarily shifted the way the Nets have been viewed within the New York area for a reason. And with KD, the pressure is on him to break a championship, give the Nets their first championship ever. Which I also think is one of the reasons why he went there, because not only does he feel like he's validating himself finally, but he's also bringing a franchise their first championship. Kind of like a LeBron situation. He felt like he validated himself in Miami, but all he had to do was, well, let me go back to my home and bring them a championship. And so he may have looked at, well, what if I go to Brooklyn, the New York team that hasn't had the same reputation, the same culture, the same credibility of the Knicks, and bring them a championship and make them the top face of the New York area of North United States basketball, Northeastern United States basketball. Because KD really could accomplish a lot by doing that, and I think that's why he is in the position that he wants to be in. And I think that's extremely important to look at and view, because we can't sit here and just underrate or undervalue, the importance of having that historical context to a franchise. And we remember a year ago when KD made this decision, they were talking about Kyrie was really the one who wanted to go here. He wanted to go to the Nets. KD was leaning towards the Knicks. But Kyrie said, no, let's go to the Nets. Let's do it there. Let's win there. And he said, okay. And listen, we know the Nets didn't have a great season. We know Kyrie was hurt. That's a big question with the Nets. Even with KD, can Kyrie stay healthy? That may be one reason why keeping a Chris LeVert or a Spencer Dinwiddie may be very important, just in case Kyrie gets hurt, because you still have those guys who can go out there and ball and handle the ball if Kyrie gets hurt. You still have DeAndre Jordan. You have a good mixture of talent, of young talent, some veterans, some stars on that team. And that's why, to me, the Nets are a team to be reckoned with going forward. They're a team that you can't sit here and just say they're going to be easy pickings. They are now, in some people's mind, the favorites in the East without even playing a full minute of basketball together. And I'm sure, the Nets are going to look at things. Sean Marks is going to look at things and say, hey, we'll see how the season goes. If things work out, we'll, make additions and subtractions where needed to make sure we are ready for that run. Because like I said, with the NBA season starting later, but the trade deadline being around the same, you basically only get a month and a half, 2 months to really know, all right, do we need to start making changes to this team or not? Because remember, a normal NBA season, you wouldn't really have to make that decision until maybe the new year. And think, okay, what moves do we might need to start making? We've played 3-4 months together. What moves do we need to start making? Where now you only get 2 months to say, okay, if this ain't working out the gate, we might have to go ahead and make a move now to go ahead and change it up. That's why all the names that you don't potentially hear being moved or haven't been moved that we may have thought potentially could have been moved might be moved then. Because sometimes teams prefer to play out and see what's happening. What if an injury happens? What if a team realizes they have a bigger hole in the area than they thought? Now they might be a little bit more desperate to make a move to fix it, which then could give them more trade compensation and trade value. And I think that's what the Nets could be. I think KD's going to come back and be KD. I think KD's going to drop 25 to 30 a game very efficiently. He'll be the guy. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a little rusty at first. Or you might even see an inefficient KD at first. Because remember, he's trying to get his shot back. He's trying to get, in the pace of the game back. He could do that. And so he might say, hey, let me just jack up some shots a little bit to try to get myself back at a better place. Kyrie will have to see if he can stay healthy. That's his biggest thing. We know when Kyrie's on the floor, he is a human highlight film. Crossing people up, threes, best finisher in the league. And I think this role of him being the second option is his best role. Because not all the pressure will be on him. I don't think he can be the main guy in a pressure-filled situation, but he can be a great player in a situation where he could be the second guy, and I think that's why he's in that kind of that role he was in with LeBron. And then we see they brought back Joe Harris, so they have their sharpshooter, Jared Allen, DeAndre Jordan in the front court. I think they're in a really good place. We'll just have to see if the Nets can put it together and reach the expectations, bring their franchise their first championship, and really establish themselves as a brand in basketball. The Brooklyn Nets brand being established, and then you could give all of that credit, not only with KD validating himself, but all that credit of the validation of the Brooklyn Nets to KD. And then I want to get into one more thing here before we get out of here for today. Marcus Smart, in reports, have been told, or not told, but has been said that he is not untouchable in trade talks. They're saying that, hey, he might potentially be on the move. Not aggressively, seeking a trade, but just, hey, if you're interested in Marcus Smart, that isn't something that we will be closed off to. And I think, to me, that would be interesting. Marcus Smart has really developed over the last few years. Marcus Smart was kind of like Jimmy Butler when he entered the league. More of an energy guy, defensive guy. He wasn't really a great scorer. He was just the energy defender. And then, especially in the bubble and last year, he really seemed to have developed more of an offensive game. Kind of became slightly more of a playmaker in his offensive line and game. Like, I'm not saying he's like a elite scorer or anything of the sort, but he seemed to have developed a better three-point shot. He seemed to have developed a better feel offensively in the game. And so, to me, I look at it and think, okay, if that's all true, he might be a guy who you could see the Clippers potentially go after. Maybe feel like, okay, you may sit here and say they're getting a better version of Patrick Beverley, but he is someone who could handle the ball a bit, but not really. You could see teams who may sit here and say, we just need that extra guy off the bench, and Marcus Smart could be in your radar and say, hey, let's go for him. Let's see if he can do it. It's one of those things where you just have to see, man. You have to see. I don't think Marcus Smart was going to be moved. I don't think that's actually going to happen. So I don't think that's definitely the case. But I definitely think that if you're Boston, if you maybe can get something you like back for him, maybe a starting big man, another guy. I know they signed Tristan Thompson, but maybe try to add more upgrade of depth to that position. Maybe, add another scorer for the replacement of Gordon Hayward. I could understand why they look into that deal. So it'll be interesting to see if anything even happens off that with Marcus Smart. But that's all the time we have for the podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Thank you for letting me be part of your day. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_basketball. Also, don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts here at the GSMC Podcast Network. This is your host, Brice Lewis, saying, have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.